The Detroit Lions are fresh off their bye week, and they had a tough matchup against the Los Angeles Chargers where they were able to gut out a really tough victory. Let's talk about some of the talking points from that game and some of the things that stood out most to me in this video, starting right now. What's going on, guys? Welcome to the Pride of Detroit YouTube channel. I'm Miko, and in today's video, we are going to be recapping the Lions' big time win over the LA Chargers this past Sunday and talk about some of the things that went right, some of the things that went wrong, and some of the things that really have me still very much encouraged about this team going forward. And listen, these are just some of my biggest takeaways. So like you guys know, let me know in the comment section below what are some of the biggest takeaways that you had coming out of this game, whether they be good, whether they be bad, or whether there's somewhere in the middle. I want to hear from you guys in the comment section below. But without further ado, let's get into some of the big things that really stood out to me in this Lions win over the Chargers. Now, as we all know, the Lions won this game 41-38 over the LA Chargers. And let's just get the negative stuff out of the way, because I do have so many positive things that I want to talk about in this video. So at the top of this video, let's get out the one negative, which was the defensive performance. Listen, whenever you see a score 41-38, even if your team wins, you can't necessarily feel great about it. And going into this game, me and Morgan talked about it in our recap or our film study of the Chargers, is that, listen, this was going to be a tough game for the Lions, no doubt about it. However, I can say that this was not the way I thought that this game was going to play out. I thought it would definitely be more of a grueling defensive battle, that both teams would probably be forcing each other into some really tough situations where the offense was going to be finding some, difficult times of connecting and getting into a rhythm. And that wasn't the case. Both offenses flourished throughout this game. And it really kind of shined a light on some of the deficiencies that this Lions defense has had at various times throughout the year to this point. And it was really at its worst in this game against the Chargers. Now, this defense was clearly bailed out by the Lions offense, and we're going to talk about that more in depth, later in this video. But to keep the focus on this defense, listen, there was some bad, lots of bad actually, and there was some good. So first and foremost, let's talk about the bad, right? This is a game, like I said, you give up 38 points. You're not able to register a sack. You're only able to register 12 hurries and 5 quarterback hits, but again, never able to get Justin Herbert on the ground. And because Justin Herbert never got, taken to the ground or really got, rattled too much, he was able to have a big day throwing the football. 323 passing yards, 4 touchdowns. Keenan Allen basically torched your secondary, a secondary that had actually been playing pretty well the last few weeks. But Keenan Allen comes up against this Lions defense, goes for 175 yards, picks up 2 touchdowns. And whether it was Cam Sutton or Jerry Jacobs or Kirby Joseph, whoever was tasked with keeping, an eye on him or being the person to line up with him, everybody got it in this game when it came to Keenan Allen. And again, that's a huge hat tip to him. And it's even a hat tip to Justin Herbert. These are 2 very talented players and some of the best at their position. But when you're coming out of a bye week, when you're coming past the trade deadline and you decided not to make any big time moves on your defense, and your defense has this type of performance, yeah, it's going to have a lot of people looking, at your defensive coordinator. It's going to have a number of people looking at your GM. And there's going to be questions about, did you make the right decisions when it comes to this defense? Not to mention, again, you look at this game, we're not just talking about the yardage that they gave up, but you also only had 4 total defensive stops in this entire game. And in fact, you didn't have a single defensive stop in the second half of this game. That's problematic. Even in a win, it's still problematic to have that type of performance from from 1/3 of your football team. Now, like I did say, though, there were some good things that come out of this football game with the defense. And again, it's not as many as the bad things, but the good things that did come out of it actually did help contribute to this team being in position to win this game. They forced the only turnover with a great interception by Kirby Joseph on the sideline that was, again, very much needed just to be able to steal a possession away from the Chargers. You held the Chargers under 100 yards rushing. Barely, but you still did it. You held them to only 3.8 yards per carry. That's awesome as well. when a team is already torching you through the air, the last thing you want to do is give them any kind of ground in the run game as well. So the defense at least showing up in one aspect of the game and being able to limit a facet of that Chargers offense is a huge win. Now, going into this next week and having to prepare for the Bears and even down the rest of the stretch of the season, the Lions are going to have to figure out a way of getting this defense rolling. Whether it's, again, being able to scheme up more blitzes, whether it's just the fact that these guys, specifically looking at the defensive line, have to find more ways of winning, in that understanding that, listen, your best players have to be their best players every single game. As great as Aleem McNeil has been, and I, basically was praising him in the Raiders game, not a whole lot out of Aleem in this game. As much as we love to hype up Hutch and how he's doing it all and he's kind of being Superman, for this defense, again, another game without a sack, and now that's 4 games in a row for him. This is not me necessarily hitting the panic button or even necessarily trying to point blame at any one person. This is a collective issue. This entire defensive line is not finding a way of succeeding. And Dan Campbell talked about it today in his press conference. Some of it is just technique. Some of it is communication. But whatever the case may be, these guys, specifically looking at the players, have got to figure it out. Because I do believe that Aaron Glenn is coming up with good schemes. I do believe he's putting them in position, but he can't go out there and help these guys shed blocks. He can't go out there and help these guys be, locked in defensively when it comes to coverage. The players themselves have to do these things. They have to go out there and take ownership of their play. And if that doesn't start to happen, listen, the Lions may still win plenty of games. They're coming down the stretch of their season where they don't have that many tough matchups left on their schedule. But they are going to have plenty of tough matchups when it gets to the playoffs, and they are going to have to find ways for this defense to come alive and be able to keep them in games, because once you get to that point of the season, a lot of these teams have good offenses. A lot of those teams are going to have better offenses than what you even saw against the Chargers, and your defense is going to have to be able to stand up and go toe-to-toe with those offenses, because you can't expect your offense to put up 40 plus every single week once you get to the postseason. Now, we got the bad stuff out of the way. Let's get to the good stuff that came out of this game, because like I said, there was a lot of it, and a lot of it, unfortunately, yes, is all on the offensive side. Unfortunately, there's not much else I can say about the defense at this point, but there's a lot to say about this offense, because I think as good as we knew this offense would be, or thought this offense would be going into the season, I think they've been even better. And this is one side of the ball that I think has gotten better week after week, aside from that Ravens game where, again, they kind of just got ran over in that game. But coming out of the bye week, this seemed like a part of the football that was really keyed in and really was looking to be explosive at every opportunity they got. And I first want to start with the offensive line, because we don't talk about the offensive line a lot, or at least I don't talk about the offensive line a lot. And I want to take the time to talk about 2 players on this offensive line specifically, that being Taylor Decker and Penei Sewell, and how they've played to this point in the season. I don't think it should even be a debate. I think it would be an insulting question to even ask if both of these players should be in the Pro Bowl, because in my mind, they both are locks to be in the Pro Bowl this year. I think they've played that well. And when looking at Penei specifically, I think he's played well enough to even be all pro, just at the level that he's played at to this point in the season. Going into this Chargers game, or coming out of this Chargers game, might I say, Penei, 0 sacks, 0 quarterbacks, 0 hurries. When looking at his PFF grade, in comparison to other, offensive linemen or other offensive tackles, he's currently 7th in as far as graded as the best blocking, tackle in the NFL. Then you look at Taylor Decker, who maybe didn't have as great of a game, statistically as Penei, but still 0 sacks, only 1 quarterback hit. And yes, he did give up 4 hurries, but even Taylor's been getting a lot of recognition as he's rated, the 16th best pass blocking or best blocking tackle in the NFL. To be able to have to basically have your edges covered with 2 guys that you just know can go toe to toe with anyone. And going into this Chargers game, they went up against some high powered pass rushers. Joey Bosa, Khalil Mack, and Tuli Tuipulotu are all 3 of those guys are legit pass rushers. And for this Lions offensive line to not give up a sack all game, to be able to go toe to toe with that level of pass rush, is a huge testament to how, privileged and how great these 2 tackles have been for this Lions team. And it's something that, I hope as we kind of get to the end of the season, if these guys are able to remain healthy, I hope they get the proper recognition because they've played out of their minds, specifically Panay. To go from where he was drafted a few years ago, and for us all to be saying like, "Hey, Panay is going to be considered one of the best, right tackles in the NFL in a few years," and for him to actually be, living up to that hype is a huge, testament to him. And Taylor Decker, I just don't think like Taylor ever really gets enough credit for just the hard work he puts in, for how he goes about doing his job, pushing through injuries, even when he's been injured and he's had to miss time, how he puts in the work to get back because he knows how valuable he is to this team. Taylor just doesn't get enough credit, in my opinion. So for both of these guys to be playing well, to be coming off a game where they probably played their best football, is a huge testament. And also got to give a huge shout out to Hank Fraley and the job that he's done with this offensive line, and to be able to get them all on the same page to the point where, again, it's typically a little shocking when you go into games and these guys have bad games. Listen, when it comes to this offense, there are plenty of things that we could point to as to why they've been successful. But I do got to make sure that whenever we do start talking about, why this offense is successful and we start giving credit to different people, we always got to keep in mind that if it wasn't for these two tackles, I don't know if we get the same level of play out of this offense. And so coming out of this game, I definitely want to tip my hat to those guys because they did have an amazing performance, and it was one of the biggest reasons that this offense was able to sustain drives and be able to put up points, drive after drive. Now, the next thing I do want to talk about coming out of this game is the performance that we got out of Jahmyr Gibbs and David Montgomery. And I feel like coming out of this Chargers game, a lot of Lions fans were able to finally take that big sigh of relief, and they were able to actually kind of celebrate because we finally got something that I think a lot of us have asked for, which is like an equal share of snaps and opportunities for both Gibbs and Monty in this game. Obviously, the last few weeks, we've gotten to see what Jahmyr looks like as a lead back when he's taking the bulk of the carries and getting a lot more opportunities. But even with Monty coming back, we kind of knew that, listen, there was always the possibility that things would go back to the status quo where Monty's, getting the bulk share of the snaps and, Jahmyr's being sprinkled in here and there. And I don't think that was the case really in this game. I thought that Ben Johnson did an amazing job giving both guys their opportunities to shine in both the run and pass game, and it paid off in a big way. Those two alone combined for 193 yards, with 116 of those going to David Montgomery and 77 of those going to Jahmyr Gibbs. David Montgomery also got his touchdown while Jahmyr was able to get two other touchdowns. And specifically for Jahmyr, like he got those touchdowns in the red zone where I think in previous weeks or early in the season, a lot of those were going to David. And I understood why, right? He's your power back, and getting a touchdown in the red zone can be tough, and it's going to be, more of a physical, rep. And it's not something that you want your rookie running back to have to take too much unnecessary punishment. But for the Lions and for Ben Johnson and Dan Campbell to trust Jahmyr in those situations and feel like, you know what, we don't have to bring in David. We don't have to tip our hand that way. And we can make the defense guess a little bit more. And for Jahmyr to really flourish in those roles and be able to finish his opportunities to get, in the end zone is a huge sign for this offense going forward. These two guys are just playing out of their minds. And obviously David's coming back from that injury, and for, his first game back to go for 116, to have that big 75-yard run that was, obviously helped out by a huge block with the wide receiver, specifically J-Mo in that situation, is great. And obviously you're starting to see more and more people ask the question like, hey, could this be the best running back duo that we have in the NFL right now? And I'll at least say this. Obviously, it's still very early in Jahmyr's career, but it definitely looks like it when looking at this season alone, right? I don't know if there's another running back duo that are putting up these numbers. David Montgomery already has 500 yards rushing. He has 7 touchdowns, and he's averaging 4.7 yards per carry. On the flip side, Jahmyr Gibbs has 476 yards. He has 4 touchdowns, and he's averaging 5.3 yards per carry. I think you're going to be really hard-pressed to find two running backs that have numbers that similar, that are that close together. And I think, they may not get the same notoriety as some of these other running backs. Obviously, like A.J. Dillon and Aaron Jones are a really good running back duo. But again, their numbers don't compare to these guys. I think Zach Moss and Jonathan Taylor have been really good for the Colts. But again, their numbers don't compare to this. And I think when the season's kind of done and over with, the Lions very well could have two running backs that ran for over 1,000 yards. Or if not a combined, or if not, them both having 1,000 yards, Jahmyr may have like 1,000 yards all purpose, because like I said, he's already closing in on 500 rushing yards. and he already has 200 receiving yards. He's not that far off from having that type of season. So I know it's one of those things that if you see it on social media where people are trying to, figure out, or they're trying to debate, could this be the best running back duo? I really do think it's going to be really difficult to argue right now. I do think there are some good running back duos, and especially if you start factoring in like even like a Lamar Jackson and a Gus Edwards, like that's a really dangerous running duo. I just don't know right now for my money if there's a better running back duo that I would be willing to put my money on over David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs at this point in the season. Now, and last but not least, we can't talk about the offense without talking about the performance of our quarterback in Jared Goff, and easily one of the best performing wide receivers in the NFL this year in Amon-Ra St. Brown. They once again combined for an amazing stat line between the two of them. Jared Goff for going over 300 yards once again, putting up 2 touchdowns, and Amon-Ra going over 150 receiving yards, 1 touchdown, and still being able to even factor into the running game a little bit, be again kind of just expanding his role and showing how dynamic he can be for this offense. Going into this year, the Lions needed Jared Goff to play like this. I believe that they needed him to be able to still showcase this level of ability. And I think, like I said a few weeks ago, one of the best things that he's done is improved his play on the road. Because going into a game like this, like we talked about at the beginning of the video, and your defense not being able to get stops, Jared Goff stepped up in the biggest way and still helped carry the load for this offense, along with the likes of his running game and along with the likes of his offensive line. Not rattled, not overthinking things, not being pressured by, again, a really dynamic defensive line, and still being able to deliver the ball, and especially in clutch moments, especially in the fourth quarter where they needed to get into field goal range, and being able to make some pinpoint passes to Amon-Ra, to Sam Laporta, and get them in position to, again, win that game. And Amon-Ra is, again, this feels like his breakout year. We are seriously going to be talking about how this is easily one of the 5 best wide receivers in the NFL. And I think this is the type of performance that he needed to really justify that type of season. I don't mean just this game specifically, but I mean this season in general. This is what, his 4th 100-yard receiving game. And that's something that only the best receivers do in the NFL. And again, this is talking about a receiver that's coming from a draft class that was heavily touted with Jamar Chase, with Jalen Waddle, with Devonta Smith. There was a lot of high quality wide receivers to come out of that draft. And Amon-Ra is either hanging with or surpassing a lot of them. And also in the sense of also being able to stay healthy, because even as good as Jalen Waddle has been in his career, he's had to deal with injuries. Same with Jamar Chase. Devonta Smith, I don't think has dealt with as many, but again, Amon-Ra is clearly showing that he belongs in that tier of wide receivers when we're talking about some of the best in the game. And games like this are just another reason why opposing defenses are going to have to figure out something in terms of trying to limit him. And so far, nothing has worked. Just like how Keenan Allen was able to be moved all over the field and was still able to hurt the Lions defense, Amon-Ra did the same thing to the Chargers. It didn't matter where he lined up. It didn't matter who they tried to match him up with. He was still finding ways of getting open. And he finally got some of those, big play opportunities that he was talking about in the offseason in this game. And I think if that becomes more of a staple of his game, if that becomes more consistent, the sky is truly the limit for him going forward. So guys, that's going to do it for my recap of this game and talking about some of the things that really stood out to me. Like I said at the top, you obviously have, a lackluster performance from your defense, but such an amazing performance from so many key pieces on this Lions offense. And that's how this Lions team was able to get the win. Combine that with some clutch kicking from Riley Patterson, some gutsiness from Dan Campbell. And again, I get that that's sometimes a little uneasy for some people, but when it works, it works. And I think it's really hard to second guess it when it paid off in such a big way. And it actually proved to be very necessary in order for the Lions to get this win. So like I said at the top of the video, I really do want to hear from you guys. Let me know what stood out to you from this game. What are some of your biggest takeaways? Are there other things that you're concerned with? Are you just as concerned about the defense as I am? Is there someone on the offense that I maybe should have given credit to, but I didn't? Like I said, let me know in the comment section below. I would love to hear from you guys. Also, if you're looking for any more Lions content, be sure to check out prideofdetroit.com, where we're always uploading new articles over there. And be sure to hit that subscribe button. That way you can be notified anytime we go live, anytime we upload new videos, or anything of that nature. Like I said, I'm Miko. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.